So having attained to the worlds of the righteous and having dwelt there for eternal years, for everlasting years, he who has fallen from yoga means here is a person who has not attained self-realization. Obviously, the verses here are talking about the concept of reincarnation. The reincarnation is where there is a very clear suggestion that death is not the ultimatum. So there is bound to be a birth after death. Either you accept it on faith or you can accept it on reason. Where reason doesn't help you understand, you fall back on faith. And these are the two verses which clearly mention what would happen to a person who leads a life of righteousness, who leads a life of service and sacrifice. What happens to him because he is well and truly on path to salvation, but he falls short of realization? What happens to him? Yeah, he says, such a person, having fallen from yoga because he has not attained realization, is born into the family of the pure and the wealthy. Shuchinam means pure. These are the people who are pure at heart. These are the people who are leading a very heavenly life. Means there's full of joy, there is harmony, there is peace. They are highly pious, spiritual people. So the family you're born into is, you will be born into a parentage, an environment which is very conducive. So you will find the parents themselves, the environment themselves is so conducive. It's like sowing a seed in a conducive soil. This Janma may not be. You had to do enormous tapas. You've done so much hard work, but you fail to attain realization. What will happen? Next Janma, he says, guaranteed you will be born into the family which is Shuchinam. They themselves are spiritual seekers. So it makes it so conducive for you to continue the journey where you have left. And all of this because of the merit you have acquired from the good you have done in this birth. The merit is nothing but the punya, and the punya you get is when you perform actions which are of an unselfish nature. Unselfish nature are still having a residue of a desire or a motive. So you're performing unselfish, sacrificial work. You are working in the interest of others. You're striving, you're struggling, you have sacrificed your own self-interest. As a result of such work, you acquire enormous punya. So the fruits of that punya gives you a birth where you will have parentage who are pure, Shuchinam. And then he says, Srimatam. There will be enough wealth in your life that you will be provided for every material necessity. You will not have to depend on the external world for your survival. You don't have to resort to bhiksha for your needs. So your mind can be off your bread and butter. At least the basic necessities are provided for. You are taken care of. This Janma may not be. Next Janma, he says, you will be provided for. So there is mental peace assured. There is material wealth assured. This is the assurance we're getting from the Lord himself. So all that struggle you have done in this Janma, let's say you have certain quotient of vasanas, you have reduced the quotient to a very little number. Let's say you're born with 80 vasanas and you're reduced to 20 vasanas. So with the 20 vasanas you're born, you will be born in an environment which is far more conducive for your journey. Again, I'm saying, you may go with pure faith. The Lord can't speak false. Go by what the Lord is saying, or you understand it, pure logic and reason. So there is an admixture of three types of actions we perform all the time. Selfish, egoistic actions, unselfish, where your ego is liquidated and identifying with a cause. Third is selfless, where actions are dedicated towards self-realization only. The three types of actions. Now, based on the actions, you either accrue demerit or merit or enlightenment. So if you have performed, the verse 41, the seeker has performed highly unselfish work. So because of his unselfish work, he has accrued punya, and also because he has spiritually evolved and not attained realization, he is born into the environment mentioned in verse 41, which is the pure and the wealthy. Now let's see verse 42 says. Rajima, you speak little too early. You said Buddha and Lord Krishna, did you? In the context of 41. You spoke a little early. You will have to fit that into 42. Athava yoginameva kule bhavati dhimatam etadvidurlabhataram loke janma yadidrisham. Athava yoginameva kule bhavati dhimatam etadvidurlabhataram loke janma yadidrisham. Or athava, he's talking of another possibility. He is born into the family of the wise yogis only. Athava yoginameva kule bhavati dhimatam etadvi durlabhataram. This is very difficult, he says. Loke janma yadi idrisham. A birth like this is very difficult indeed is to obtain in this world, which is born into the family of the wise yogis only. The previous verse, you're born into the family of the pure and the wealthy. And this verse says you're born into the family of the wise yogis only. This is very, very rare indeed. And he himself qualified Durlabhataram. This is very, very unlikely you will get a chance. Very rare indeed. Now, why does he say this? See, it is because this verse talks about, as I said, 41 spoke about those who perform unselfish work. This verse talks about those people who are performing selfless work. Predominant nature of their sadhana is selfless work, selfless actions. Now, the difference between unselfish and selfless, the difference you got to clearly understand. In unselfish, there is still a motive. There's still a desire. actions are still worldly. Remember that. But the moment you get to selfless, in selfless actions, there is no desire. Your actions are driven only for the ultimate goal of self-realization. Your actions have no other interest but moksha. No other interest except self-realization. So imagine you have been striving for that goal of self-realization and you have not attained moksha. Nothing else interests you. I am not interested in my students. I am not interested in my works. I am not interested in the outcome of my work. I am not interested in acceptance. I am not interested in rejectance. All I'm interested in moksha. If you help me to get to myself, I am interested in you. If you are not in aligned with me to my goal of realization, I would have nothing to do with you. If that spirit, if I'm able to attune to, everything and anything I do is only to get me to the self. And let's say in that fervor, I have developed a fever, I have developed not because of corona, the fever of self-realization. Today, everybody has fever. Everybody gets symptoms of fever. That I'm not talking of that fever. The fever you develop to get to the self, the fervor you have, and you fall short of realization in this birth. Next Janma, I would be born into the family of the wise yogis only. But I am not wanting to subject myself to either 41 or 42. If you all want to make a choice, you have a choice. I don't want to make a choice because I am not subjecting myself to this possibility. My goal is I want to get to the self in this birth. There's no future. There's no harm in thinking that, isn't it? There's absolutely no harm. But look at the assurance he speaks with. The assurance is that which is very, very satisfying. So in 42, Srinivas Reddy Garu, in 42, what is the most critical element which would give you that rare possibility of being born into the wise yogis only?
Pranam Guruji. It's a selfless work is the one which we need to drive in this Janma to attain that the next Janma to born in the pure yogis.
And what is selfless work?
Is the selfless work is the one when there is no desire attached to that, and actions are driven to self-attain and to self-realization.
When your actions are driven with the only purpose of self-realization. And in order to do that, what is required? What are the two things that are required?
I said, here Guruji mentioned that no desire means like we need to have a control on our, again, go back to our five elements where we need to have.
No, if one is going back to the drawing board of the essentials and the fundamentals, then we're not ready for it.
Okay.
Now, I appreciate you are very much in line. In order to make your action selfless, first and foremost, you should be able to conceive the goal of self-realization.
Yeah, that's where Guruji, I just thought of my question was that we are talking our actions are driven to attain self-realization. We are taking about that. What was the root cause? I mean to say path towards it.
Sir, what is the root cause or what is the
not root cause, Guruji. I'm talking path to self-realization, which you're talking about.
What is the path to self-realization? The path to self-realization starts with self-purification. Self-purification is the journey. Self-realization is a destination. Now, with your association with this knowledge, You understand that I should not have desires. Agree?
Yes, yes, Guruji.
You understand you should not develop any attachment to the worldly things or beings around you.
Yes, Guruji.
You understand you must evolve to be an unselfish person, evolve to be a giver, live a life of detachment.
Yes, Guruji.
Now, the same thing when you magnify it beyond mere unselfishness, you question the very purpose, the very existence, the very reason you are born as a human. That comes. The very purpose is to realize yourself. So, just like you're convinced that you must purify the impurities within, that I should not have desires, I should not have selfishness, I should operate without attachments, I must think of a larger interest of the community, country, nation, humanity. There also exists a goal of self-realization. So in order to make your action selfless, it is important, it's imperative that you conceive the goal of self-realization. And thereafter, that goal must inspire you. It's just not merely conceiving it, it must inspire you. And that, I must say, from the time you begin your journey where the ignorance is the first level, where you don't even know about this, and then you come to slowly understand, and then it starts resonating in your life, it is a slow transformation. First time I remember the thoughts of self-realization came in my ears. It sounded like some strange experience. I don't know what it is. Until you start unfolding, it starts revealing itself to you. That's the journey. So actually, at a certain stage of your journey, that very same term starts speaking to you differently. You are able to relate to it. You're able to conceive that and keep it as a purpose of your life. Now, how many of you can actually say self-realization is the goal and want to get there? And no point having a goal without not working towards it. Has it any meaning? It's like you have created a GPS and you're not following the path. Then why have you put the GPS? Why have you put up a goal, a destination? So it is not easy to perform selfless actions. Understand that. Selfless actions is not easy. And it is selfless actions are desireless actions because there's nothing worldly that interests you. You are not interested in anything terrestrial. Therefore, it is desireless with reference to the terrestrial world. It is desireful with reference to the transcendental. You still have the desire for the self. It is desireless with reference to the world. There's nothing worldly that you seek, isn't it? Therefore, it is desireless. You still have the desire for self-realization. Please don't mistake it. You still have the fervor, the desire, the urge to get to the self. And that desire replaces every other desire. And that desire to get to the self makes it desireless with reference to all the worldly things. In fact, selfless actions must be spoken with great respect, and it has to be very carefully chosen. Now, the same thing in a relative sense. The selfless actions in the relative sense is when you do something because you have to do it. There is no interest in doing it, nor is there interest not doing it, but you do it because you have to do it. It is your obligation. Such actions, karyam karma, when you perform your karyam karma, your obligatory duty, but you have no desire to do it, nor is there a desire not to do it, so you do it because it ought to be done. Such actions at a relative level are selfless actions. Now, how many of your actions fit into this category of selfless? Very rare indeed. Durlabhataram. No, we are not talking of this Janma. This verse is talking of next Janma. We don't mistake the context of it. He's only saying next Janma. If you do these kind of efforts, if you perform selfless work here and not attain moksha, next Janma, you will be born into the family of the wise yogis only. Athava, another environment, who themselves, the yogis, are themselves in the spiritual pursuit. So you will have that upbringing from a very, very young age where you have the fervor, you have the goal, you have everything in your favor to get to self-realization. That is a very rare indeed. So maybe you can see what we are told of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna is, see, there's a many people say Lord Krishna is Avatar Purusha. Isn't it? Sorry, ma?
Paramatmani, Guruji.
What does that mean?
He is himself the Brahman.
Okay. But then, in terms of rationality and logic, I ask you, when a person, why is a person born? Can't hear you, ma.
There are some part of the Sanchita karmas, the Sanchita vasanas that are still there.
In a generic sense, you
The
have
vasanas.
certain vasanas which are not fulfilled. They need to be exhausted.
Correct.
Okay. Now, it is told that you can exhaust your vasanas even in the womb. The 9 months you spend in the womb, you could exhaust the vasanas in the womb itself. So that is the minuscule nature of vasanas, but you still needed that birth. So therefore you are born. So right from the moment you are born, from the age of infancy, which is what you look at life of Lord Krishna, even from an infant stage, he was doing miracles. So you can't say it is Brahman being born, but he's born as a realized soul. So, but if a person really realized, there's no necessity for him to be born again. So you can't say a realized soul is being reborn. There are many, many, many people out there who go about claiming that so-and-so are reincarnation of so-and-so. I will have no mention of names. We don't have any hidden agenda. When I say this, I'm only explaining the concepts to you. So don't take references, please. There are people who claim themselves to be God realized, and some people claim they are reincarnations of so-and-so. This is dangerous to do so. I would only caution, don't fall a prey to such claims, because no person who has attained realization will never ever claim it, nor would he announce it to the world. Far from it. So it is impossible, not difficult, impossible for a man of realization to be born again. So if you're born, you have to have some vasanas to be exhausted. So 41 says you're born into that environment because you have performed unselfish or sacrificial work, and yet you have not attained realization. So you are born into the family of the pure and the wealthy. So your spiritual needs, you have an environment where environment is conducive, your material needs are provided for, you can focus your attention on the sadhana. But when you have done selfless work and you have not attained realization, you're born into the family of the pure, of the wise yogis only, where the your parents or the immediate environment themselves, they are all great yogis. They themselves are spiritual seekers. So that is a very rare birth. Yeah, Rajima, you wanted to clarify something, and you
No, Guruji, Lord Krishna's birth, he says that is yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. When there is so much of
adharma.
adharma going on, I reincarnate, I come into the world to establish dharma yet again.
What does I mean? I means
self.
the Atman and the self, Atman or the self. The same Atman spoke through Lord Krishna then. In different periods of history, the self manifested itself. Means the self expressed. Now the self is manifesting in you to the extent
that it's enlivening whatever I am.
it is enlivening 100%.
That's Guruji.
If it doesn't, then that but becomes inactive, isn't it? It's not so. But the question is, what is the question? What's the phrase I used? The self is expressing, manifesting to the extent I'm still with you when you said yada yada dharmasya. Whenever there's adharma, the Lord says, I manifest, isn't it? Because of sheer demand and supply. There's adharma rising, and there's a need for these higher values. The society has stooped to a very low level. There is a need for resurrection. There's a great demand for peace and harmony. So a man of realization comes, and through his spiritual luster and radiance, he shifts the balance from adharma to dharma. Okay. And this happens time and again and again, yuge, isn't it? Happens again and again. Now my question is, the very same self which manifested through the Lord, which manifested through the great Buddha, which manifested through the great Ramana, which manifested through the great Ramakrishna, all these great men, the self manifested. Now the same self is manifesting you to the extent, complete the statement.
To the extent there is adharma in me.
Ayyo, Pandava. நீங்க முதல்ல அந்த மியூட் பண்ணுங்க. அப்பா பயமா இருக்கு, நீங்க என்ன சொல்றீங்க next? No, ma, it's not the question of adharma in you. See, the self manifests to the extent you have unfolded the self. What do you mean unfolded? To the extent you have realized the self expresses, manifests through you, isn't it? Do you understand that? Chumma not panadingo. I want to ensure you have understood. The self manifests itself to the extent you have unfolded yourself. What do you mean unfolded? To the extent you have realized yourself, to that extent the self is gushing forth. The self manifests through you. If you have realized 10% of the self is expressing through you 10%. 90% is avidya. 90% you're still full of attachments, vasanas, desires, bondage. You're not liberated yet. If a person is 50% realized, 50% the self speaks through him. The self expresses through him. Because he has removed the ignorance of the vasanas. If a person has 100% realized himself, he becomes a man of realization. It is 100% self manifesting. So right now the self is expressing to you through me to the extent I have unfolded the self. If I have only unfolded 0.5%, to that only 0.5% is Atman expressing. If I have unfolded 70%, 70% of the self is expressing. You get it? So the unfoldment is a gradual process. It's not 0 and 100. So right throughout your life, your journey, you're actually unfolding, removing the layers of ignorance. And as the layers of ignorance are removed, the self starts expressing, the radiance starts expressing. So we only have to understand in relative and absolute. So when in the verse he says, I am born, it means self manifests through a person who has attained realization. It's not that the realized soul is born. That's misinterpreted. You can't say, this is where he said, I am born means a man of realized soul is born. That is not possible. It's against the very logic. Because if you have a desire, okay, now fundamental logic. If a person, Ramji, you're clarifying something, I'll get to you. But if I can engage, a man of realization is said to have attained that state when he has no desires, isn't it?
Right.
Now, when you attain realization, the experience is, you know that Brahman is real. You also know that the world is an illusion. Am I right?
Yes.
Now, when there is no further desire to be born, where would you be born into, and what are you trying to relieve? Because the whole thing is illusion for you. Do you find a discord in that?
Yeah. I presume that if you are fully realized, then you won't be born again.
The reason being?
Understanding correct? Reason being that you have exhausted all your vasanas and you have no desires left, and you have yourself is manifesting 100%, and then there is no need for you to be born again into an illusion of the world.
Correct. Your understanding is right. So there is no further world to be born into. If the world itself is illusion, then what is adharma in the illusion, ma? Isn't it? Doesn't the question arise? If the world itself is illusory, what about the sufferings and sorrow and adharma in that illusory world? Does that have any meaning? So it's like, imagine example, Ramji, you're doing great social work and you want to uplift the sufferings of people, and you have took up a humongous project and you have been very successful getting all the help, garnered help. And all of that, let's say you're doing in the dream. Huh? And when the day had come where you have to hand over all that 15, 20 years of your work, you're handing it over to the recipients. It's just that you fell off the bed and you woke up. Having woken up, you realized what a wonderful dream you had. And you also realize it is left unfinished. Would you want to go back into the dream and just hand over the certificates to the deserving and say, let me come back? Would you want to, sir?
Well, then you realize that it was not real. So I don't know whether you would like to go back, or is there a way of going back at all? Yeah.
There is no way of going back. And a person who has woken up will not want to go back. It's just a dream. So in that sense, a man of realization, there is no question of being born again. So let's not be mistaken that a men of realization are born. That doesn't happen. Okay, sir. Yes, you clarified something. Can you want to bring it up, sir?
No, Guruji, I was not clarifying. I was asking a question that, ever since I started attending the discourses, I keep analyzing that what am I doing which is selfish, what am I doing which is unselfish. Just trying to, do an audit of whatever I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. And
Right.
many times it is difficult to classify some of the actions because of course, and so what I'm trying to understand is that is at least between selfish and unselfish, there is still a better clarity, and you can classify 90% of the things you can clarify. But between unselfish and selfless, although you mentioned it very clearly that just self-realization is the only desire you will have when you're selfless. But so many actions, I find it difficult to classify between unselfish and selfless. Because you might do certain things in the pursuit of self-realization. So in that context, I was asking knowledge sharing, for example, what you are doing. In this particular field, I may do in some other field and somebody else may do in some other field. Knowledge sharing and uplifting the levels of understanding and knowledge of the masses. Is that an unselfish act? Because you may be doing this particular thing in your case as a part of your journey towards self-realization, or are you doing it as a part of your unselfish act? How do you classify this?
So it is a very valid question, I would say, but it is important. The only way we can answer this is by fundamentally understanding that action is always neutral.
Right.
So
the intent, yeah.
So the action being the same, which will remain the same the rest of my life, because this is my swadharma, right?
Yeah.
So what actually has changed and will change is the intention.
Yeah.
As to why am I doing what I'm doing? So in my clarification to Srinivas Reddy Garu, I clearly mentioned the two things that's required in order to perform selfless actions is conceive a goal of realization, and then the goal must inspire you. Perhaps it's one and the same thing, but I just put it two separate things, because the concept of self-realization only comes when you come into a study of this nature. Otherwise, you don't hear of that goal or that subject matter if you're not studying the Shastras, isn't it? So when you first hear, which I did mention, when I first heard of it, it was something very strange. What is that they're talking about? And as you go through the journey of digesting, assimilating, absorbing the teachings, and then slowly, it's like a flower that slowly starts to bloom. It's like a rose. It comes as a bud and it takes next 4 or 5 days for it to completely blossom. And once it blossoms, you see the real beauty and grandeur. But 4 days ago, it was just a bud. So this concept of self-realization also we must blossom into as a seeker. So when I have risen to that level of self-realization, if I know to what extent I have risen, and when I have risen truly to that goal of realization, then whatever I do is towards the goal of realization. It's just not me speaking. Whatever I do, whether I'm playing a sport, whether I'm going for a walk, whether I'm spending time with the family, or whether I'm doing satsangs or doing my sadhana, whether I'm reading or writing or walking, whatever it is, everything is done with the only objective of attaining realization.
Yeah.
And that is possible when the goal speaks to you. You're able to, you're inspired by the goal. Therefore, my question was, how many of you are inspired by the goal of self-realization? If not, then your actions at best can only be unselfish. And even in that unselfishness, there are grades of unselfishness. Because even 80% unselfish action has got 20% selfishness, doesn't it? So you will have to start injecting actions where there's no ulterior motive at all. You just do because you have to do it. In a relative sense, I said obligation. There's no obvious fruit in mind. So in selfless actions, there is no fruit in mind at all. Are you able to relate with that?
Yes.
There's no
Thank
fruit
you.
at all.
Yeah.
So I only wish and pray that as you all evolve in this journey, you should be able to envision that goal of realization, and actions should, same action can be done for yourself, the same action can be done for others, the same action can be done for, say, realization. I can do the same action for my own selfish purposes. Is it not possible? I want to gather name or fame or whatever. Or I could genuinely do to enable or uplift your development. This knowledge is serving you all. And you all are so inspired and driven to learn this cause. So it drives me to serve this cause. So you become a driving force of me. Then lastly, what drives me? Self-realization. I keep telling myself, my journey didn't start because of any one of you. My journey is not going to end because of any one of you. I am in this journey and I'm going to take you along, you with me. Whether you want to come along is your choice. It is not going to motivate me, nor is it going to dampen me, but I'm in this journey because there's a calling within, and I've injected that spirit of effort and Shraddha to that calling. And I'm going to march towards the goal. It's not that I lack feelings or emotions. I have a lot of feeling and emotion, but I'm not being emotional, that's all. How long does it take for anyone to put a full stop or a comma to this association, sir? Ramji?
Just a minute.
Would that end my sadhana?
No.
Should that end my sadhana or my journey?
No. No.
So, therefore, what should drive you is the goal. The rest of it is paraphernalia, is just ensuring you that it protects your interest in the thought that when you listen to sattvic music, it protects your mental framework, isn't it? That kind of environment. You meet the right people, you eat the right food, you listen to right music, you wear the right kind of clothes, you do everything right so that it just reminds you. So does that help, G? So the only way you can clarify that answer is action is neutral. It's the intent. And in order for the action to be selfless, you must conceive the goal of self-realization. So ask yourself, what is the clarity of the goal of realization? It's like if I remove my spectacles, I see you all, but it is all little blur. Image is there, but it's blur. But the moment I put this, it's crystal clear. So how clear is the picture of self-realization the moment I say of moksha, I talk of Atma Vidya? Is it all only poetic words or does it strike something in you? It's like an Olympic athlete wanting to win an Olympic gold for his country. It is not a mere imagination. It is a reality for him, isn't it? So when an Olympic athlete or a sportsman is preparing for Olympics and he is in that country. He is in the Olympic village. His game is about to showcase another couple of days. Right from the time he had prepared. Other day I came across a beautiful saying by, who is that who's won that 100-meter gold sprint? Who is that chap?
Usain Bolt. Huh?
Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt, a quote of him came, he said, I prepared for 4 years for 9 seconds. Can you imagine that? I have prepared for 4 years for 9 seconds, and you can't put in 2 months of hard work? I thought that one of the best descriptions of Shraddha. Shraddha is that. 4 years I slogged in and day out just for the 9 seconds, not for fame, to achieve that 9-second goal. He may have got name, fame, following, yes, all that comes. He's not interested in that. I want, that's my goal, Olympic medal, 9 seconds I got to clinch. I put in 4 years of effort. So every effort, every sweat, every action, every thought, is it dedicated towards attainment of the self? Then and then only your actions are selfless. And even then, there's no guarantee of realization. If you don't attain, fall back on 42. You will be born into the family of the wise yogis only. Durlabhataram, very rare. Why is it Durlabhataram? Because, why is it very difficult?
Because to reach that stage is very difficult.
It's difficult to reach that state of selfless action. Once you reach and you fail, you're protected. Don't worry. All right, sir.
So actually, Guruji, this is a very good thing. Because yesterday, when we were watching 100 meters heats of women, and okay, exactly the same thought I and Usha were talking, that this 12 seconds, they were 12 seconds, not 9. Men is at 9 and women are at 12.
Yeah.
So we were wondering that just the 12 seconds for which they worked for 4 years, and there were 8 people running, only the first few get selected and the others. So how much effort they have put in which has gone waste? Has it gone waste, or is it that something which will propel them to do something better next time? We don't know. But I think this particular shloka, which says that you will be rewarded in the next janma for what you have done, and if you have fallen short, I think is a great relief for people that you continue to do. And even if you don't reach in this janma, you have a chance of reaching it in the next janma, because it is an accumulated bank account you are creating. It is not a one-time affair. I think that is a very good thing that I have picked up from these 2 shlokas.
Now, if I may have to clarify this. Now, if you talk of an athlete who has struggled and strived and not succeeded, what would the athlete carry forward into next birth?
Yeah. So if the athlete was running in the purpose of a self-realization, in the sense that is the athlete trying to do it for the sake of money, or is he trying to do it for the sake of understanding his own potential and thereby reaching God through that? Let us say, I mean, self-realization, we call it God. That some people will say that I will reach that level of self-realization. Some people may, but I don't know what the person will carry into the next janma unless it has been done with a purpose of unselfishness or selflessness, whatever.
So what is carried forward is only the merit or the demerit, arising out of your intent.
Correct.
So if I can't carry my physical stamina, I can't carry my know-how of a particular field. I could be a very good chartered accountant, I could be a very good musician, I could be a very good athlete or swimmer. If I could be a very good swimmer, but next Janma again, I got to start learning to flap and swim, isn't it? It's not that I will become an automatic gymnast or a professional swimmer. It doesn't. So nothing is carried forward. So the only thing that is carried, what are the things that's carried forward? Okay, let me ask Gayatri Ma. Gayatri Ma, what are the only thing that is carried forward when we die?
The goal, what we have perceived, and that desire. These two things carry forward to the next. And as you say, punya and the papa.
So list is getting longer.
The passion to win that goal will be so aggressive in him that it gets carried forward, because it's unfulfilled in him. So that gets carried forward in this next Janma.
But just because you have been a failure, does it mean you're not exhausted your vasana? I have a vasana for playing badminton. Now, when I go into the court and play the game, hasn't that exhausted my vasana to play, irrespective I won or not?
But the desire to be on the top or win is not there in you, no, Guruji. When you go to a sports
the desire to be on the top is your innate desire, because you are innately seeking the self. You will not be content if you come third. You will want to come second. Innately, you will not be content with second. You want to come first. That is the spiritual nature in you. That is the self in you wants to have more and more and more. It is not just in sport. It is also in wealth. It's also in beauty. It's also in knowledge. Isn't it?
Yes.
So it is nothing to do with how much you want. That wanting more is your, in fact, if you philosophize it, you are seeking the self. So everybody is unknowingly seeking the self because they want more and more. They're never satisfied, whatever it is. But the fact that you have a vasana and you entered that particular field, doesn't the vasana get exhausted? So next Janma, if I have, it's not necessary. I'll still carry my badminton racket with me to next Janma.
No, that is not there.
Then what is, so therefore the unfulfilled desires are carried forward, isn't it? So one that is carried forward is your unfulfilled desires. What is carried forward is the acquired wisdom, the wisdom you've acquired, the ignorance in the form of your vasanas, and the karma phala, which is the fruits of your actions, which is your punya or papa. Or the selfless work you have done, you will be born into the family of 42nd verse category. See, we are talking exclusively, but the interesting thing is every human being performs all 3% of actions, isn't it? So you will get merit, demerit, and the self. So just to repeat, the three things that are carried forward into next birth is your ignorance in the form of unfulfilled vasanas and desires. The second, you are carrying forward your wisdom, which is the unfoldment of the self. And the third is your punya and papa, which is the karma phala, the fruits of your actions, which will determine which environment you're born into, which is what 41 and 42 are clearly telling. 41 says unselfish work, 42 says selfless work. Okay. I think Annapurnama has been wanting to clarify something, and then we'll come to Gopala Krishnanji. So just please hold on. Yes, Annapurnama.
Namaste, Namaste Guruji.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible that self-realized persons are also born again in this world out of compassion for the human beings who are still in the illusory world, to lead them to the right path and tell them that it is not very difficult. These are the things, but higher goal. Is it possible that they will be born again?
Okay. There is a little
Like
disruption
Acharya
at your.
himself. Sorry, Guruji. Now
No problem.
now
I got your
Guruji,
question.
is it
I
any better?
no, I got your question, Ma. I got your question. I'll clarify. Okay. Now,
Thank
see, it is very difficult to clarify questions like this apart from going on the basis of what the knowledge says. The knowledge always tells us that you attain the goal of self-realization when you have exhausted your vasanas. So that vasana-lessness, so the state of perfection is defined in the Shastras as vasana-lessness or desirelessness. Point one. The second point is one who reaches the state of vasana-lessness means one who has reached that state of self-realization, they don't fall back into that state of bondage. Once you are liberated, you don't come back into the state of bondage again. Point two. The third point, since a person has exhausted his vasanas and attained realization, they are free from any further birth and death cycle. There is no further birth and death cycle. So these are 3 points you got to remember. What are the 3 points? The first point, we said vasana-lessness is described as state of self-realization. Second point, we also said one who attains that state of liberation doesn't fall back into that state of bondage. Means it's not that one who has attained realization again develops a fresh vasanas. It is not possible. That they don't fall back into that lower state again. Thirdly, one who attains that state is not subjected to the cycle of birth and death anymore. Now, if you go what these 3 points are, what we can conclude that there is no further birth for a man of realization because there is no more vasana. So it is possible that a person is born 98%, 99.5% sattvic state. So at a very young age, with very minimal effort, that 0.5 bridge between him and realization is attained. So from a very young age, they are realized. But you may come to believe that they were realized souls being born. It is not so, because against the very definition what the great gurus have told us. So it is not to dislodge any reverence or respect we have for the gurus. So don't mistake it. It is only to understand how the principle works. And it is subjected to every individual, including a man of realization, because these laws have to function, isn't it? Okay, so thanks, Ma. So as I said, he is, as realized soul, is not born again. Okay, right. All right. Yeah, Gopala Krishnan ji.
Namaste, Guruji. I am trying to imagine what it is like self-realization. What it feels like, and what it looks like, or what it is. And second is similarly, what is next janma? So it is becoming very difficult to have a little concrete shape of it, what it is, or getting a strong feeling of what it is. So my suggestion, or rather doubt, is that instead of focusing on self-realization as a goal, as a plan, as an effort, as a, years of effort as long as you live. They all look like, putting more burden on the mind and the feelings. So instead, can't it be that every moment, every second in our life, as long as we live, and our thought process as well as our action is driven by the thought process, goes in a particular pattern, which gives you the happiness, blissfulness at every moment you do that job. Okay. So it is focus is more on the present and every moment, and also some kind of review, whether if something has gone wrong, many times we do that, something goes wrong in spite of thinking of doing good, but we won't be able to do the good. So keep reviewing and improving, improving. It's more of focus on movement rather than somewhere, sometime self-realization or next Janma. Is that a right thinking or?
In fact, your thinking is absolutely correct. You're not wrong at all to say that. But you may ask me, if that be so, then why are we spending so much time discussing this? Is because the text talks of it. Because there was a question in the text in the 37, 38, 39, and these last few verses, the Lord Krishna is actually answering them. And this is the only section in the entire text. He spells it out so succinctly, so beautifully he spells it out, which only gives an assurance to the efforts we put in untiringly, because somewhere deep within we all are interested in the fruit. So he's only assuring you that if you do efforts with that intent, as you said, every kshanam, every second, every minute, every moment, if you do that, all your effort will not go in vain. Whereas every other success you achieve will end in this birth. But this is the only thing that's carried forward. We have heard of it in some context or other. This is where you hear from the horse's mouth, which is a very satisfying for a sadhak, for a seeker like me, to hear from the gurus of all, guru who says this, it is going to be carried forward. It is just some kind of assurance, because it is a concern which Arjuna also had. So only in that context. But once these thoughts don't ponder, you should not ponder, nor should they bother and disturb you in your sadhana. So the accent is on action when you get into it, but it's just a sort of an assurance. Okay, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. But actually this, the movement, every movement when you follow a certain pattern or what the scriptures prescribe, you should have that, I don't know what it is, self-realization, but the feeling or the satisfaction of that state should be able to be seen that moment itself when you follow it. So that's what I mean. Instead of waiting for some day when you say, yeah, today you are self-realized, that may come this Janma or next Janma or how many Janma. We don't know as per the scriptures, but why it doesn't, emphasize on that moment itself of that self-realization or blissfulness, whatever words you use, that kind of satisfaction and sense of contentment. Total contentment.
No, in fact, the concept you're talking throughout the Shastras, there is encouragement, there is a mention. But the current context is, as I've said, is a very rare and a unique context where this subject matter is being clarified. So therefore, it is the onus on me to do justice to the text, because that's what the verse is saying. Therefore, you may find, why are we emphasizing so much on these terms, realization and future birth, when there is rather lack of clarity on these terms. But these really matter to someone who is drawn by the goal. One who is, that's why I said, took the example of an Olympic athlete wanting to win an Olympic gold is not like me unable to attune to self-realization. It's a very reality for him. So I'm only saying that this goal of self-realization is a reality for me. I'm striving, I'm driven, I have the fervor and the fever to get there. And I'm only trying to pass it through the text to you all.
In fact,
Okay,
just to add that point of this 100 meters sprint, I don't know, Usain Bolt or someone mentioned that I don't look for the competition after 4 years. I look for this moment, whether I'm better than previous moment or not. So every time I make an attempt, this attempt is better than the previous attempt or not. That's the only thing I focus. So I'm also taking a little cue from there.
Yes. In fact, if others will say that we both are actually saying the same thing. We both actually saying the same thing in a different breath, in a different tone. We actually speaking the same thing. You will only get there by doing this moment. If I don't do this moment, that moment would never arise, isn't it? I would never achieve that. All right. So certainly so. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ji. Right. 43, Ma. Tatra tam buddhi sanyogam labhate paurvadehikam yatate chatato bhuyaha samsiddhau kuru nandana. Tatra tam buddhi sanyogam labhate paurvadehikam yatate chatato bhuyaha samsiddhau kuru nandana. O Kurunandana, the name for Arjuna, there united with knowledge acquired in his former body, strives more than before for perfection. Paurvadehikam. Paurvadehikam refers to the former body. Buddhi sanyogam, united with knowledge acquired in the previous body. Yatate chatato bhuyaha. Bhuyaha is more. He strives more than before. Samsiddhau. For what? For perfection. Once you have set the ball in motion, it will only follow the direction set in motion. It's like when the bullet has left the barrel, it will only go in the direction set by the barrel. So the barrel is the previous birth. The bullet has left the barrel. It will only go in the direction. The future birth is only the direction set by the barrel in the previous birth. It will not go against. So you will only strive. Tatra. Where would you strive? There. Where? Next birth. So you will strive wherever you're born. You strive harder. Why? Two things. Because there is a conducive environment. Second, there is an inner enthusiasm known as mumukshatva. So the desire for liberation is stronger, which is mumukshatva, and the environment is conducive. Therefore, there is a tremendous thrust in you towards the self. So having united with the knowledge acquired in the former body, so you don't have to start from scratch. So that vijnanam, even though the word he uses buddhi sanyogam, united with the buddhi here is knowledge. Knowledge here only means wisdom. Knowledge is not information. So the wisdom is carried forward. The literary knowledge, you will forget it. Let's say there is a future birth, and next janma I will not remember any of this, but the wisdom will speak in a language of my own. In the next janma, let's say I am born mute. then what will happen, ma? Ushama?
Namaste, Guruji. Your intentions will speak for whatever it is, Guruji.
My intentions or
Actions.
whatever actions are performed.
Yeah.
You know, the great Ramana, great
In the
Ramana
last,
Maharishi,
yeah.
he was hardly known to have spoken, but yet the entire world
Yes.
came to him.
Yes.
So he spoke through his silence.
Yes.
So I may
Yeah.
have no literary all the information I have this janma, I may not have, I may not carry forward that because I'll still have to go through the alphabets, isn't it? A for apple,
Yeah.
all that cycle we
Yes.
all have to go through. But what is carried forward is, he says, that buddhi. So with this, he strives further. So all we got to remember is your spiritual efforts are never lost. Your spiritual efforts are never lost. Everything else is lost. So therefore, what is the appeal? If you're a smart person, you'll invest it here. Don't invest in things which you cannot take it with you, and you don't know when it's going to be taken away from you, isn't it? You know, the words of Adi Shankaracharya in Bhajagovindam. He says, life is like a, Rajima, where are you? Nalini dalagata jalamati taralam. Life is like a drop of water. You don't know when it's going to end. The only thing that is certain is our death, and it can happen any moment. And when that happens, the only thing you take it with you is your wisdom. Nothing else. All your banks and your bank accounts, nothing is taken. Who was it who had his, was it Napoleon? One of the famous leaders. What, Hariji? Suddenly you appear. Alexander. What did he do?
He wanted his hand to be kept open to tell the world he carried nothing after his death.
Amazing. So how wise that man must be, isn't it? In his own way. We can sit and find faults with everybody out there. But he wanted to teach, even on his way to the crematorium, he wanted to teach something to humanity. I am not taking anything with me. In the light of it, it just gains a weight that all you invest here, it is not lost. So the two things, the conducive environment. So your current environment is not as conducive as it would be. That's what you must understand. You may be saying, I wish I had this knowledge in my earlier stage of my life. I wish that things that can be, I can just put aside certain things and I can just do a little more sadhana. I wish I can do that. I wish I can do this. Don't we complain? In the next Janma, there is no such issue. You will be given a perfect environment, and the desire and the fervor is further enthused. He says, you will strive more than before. All right. Another few more verses and he will actually conclude it beautifully. We'll come back and we will finish the text, and very soon we'll get into the next chapter, the 7th chapter of the Gita. Right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om.